Welcome to the Powered by Age-Friendly City Zoomcast reality-style podcast.
We are movers and shakers, shaking up the old notion of silent, helpless, invisible seniors.
This is a new series of podcasts funded by the City of Vancouver and the 411 Senior Center Society.
As PBA AFC ambassadors, we
raise awareness,
share our original stories and poems,
inform, advocate, and involve seniors in discussing important social issues.
In short, these podcasts will help us,
you, in creating an age-friendly city for Vancouver today,
tomorrow the world.
You can hear us everywhere podcasts are heard. This is our Halloween-spirited Powered by Age podcast. I'm Charlotte Farrell, the coordinator, host, but we're going to be facilitated today by the lovely Robin, who is bringing a special program of remembering things in the in the Halloween spirit. So what we usually do is have each person introduce themselves. So don't talk about what you are doing in the reflection. Just do your brief introduction, and then Robin will facilitate this special program. So start with Judith.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you again. Judith Rainey here from 411 Senior Center and also the South Granville Senior Center and member of podcast.
Welcome. Leslie?
Yeah, Leslie Hebert from New Westminster. I'm a teacher and a writer, currently working on a memoir of a wonderful vacation I took in Japan a few years ago.
Neall?
Yeah, well, I'm Neall Ryon. I'm a writer, and there's my book. From the Other Side, and I just sent the revisions last night to the printer to get the next version of the book because I've added some poetry to it, and so we're ready, set, go for the next version of From the Other Side, and I have at request, I've been requested to add a little bit of something to today's program, so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, Chris?
I'm Chris, and I live in East Van, and I participate in Britannia Senior Center, and I am a member of Corky, the Queer Imaging and Writing Collective for Elders. I'm pretending to be a writer.
I think you're succeeding. Gail?
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me properly?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, fabulous. I'm Gail Harwood. I also am a writer and a teacher, and I still do the teaching part of my profession on a slower scale. I've been around, so I'm not going to say too much about that. I'm a member of 411 Seniors and a member of this podcast.
Welcome. And now, Robin.
Yeah, I'm Robin. I have been one of the mentors on the podcast. I'm a community radio maker, an arts facilitator, and am going to introduce our theme for the day. So in thinking about Halloween and, some of the disappointment that people have about not being able to dress up and transform themselves into some other character, I got to thinking about the characters that we already get to play in our lives and the characters that we have played in our lives. And I had done an exercise myself a few weeks back, which I will share some of what I came up with in this. But I thought, it's particularly salient as we age, the amount of different hats that we wear. And so it's lovely that we all are wearing different hats today, because it becomes an almost example of the different roles and responsibilities and characters that we've played in our lives, whether that's through relationship or whether that's through different jobs that we've held, different positions that we've been in. And so that's the topic today, which of course is going to take a different sort of leaning depending on how we understand what that means to us. So I want to share, just to sort of break the gates open, so to speak, this exercise that I did with myself a few weeks ago. And what I did is make a list of all of the socioeconomic labels that I have been named as, or that I can kind of take responsibility for. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. Every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, I can add more things to that. So I'm just going to read it off. Daughter, motherless daughter, sister, friend, lover, wife, sexual assault survivor, cheat, deviant, pot smoker, social drinker, party girl, radio maker, producer, festival producer, host, curator, tastemaker, change maker, master of education, arts facilitator, birth doula, end of life doula, community builder, community weaver, mentor, props mistress, costume mistress, director, theater tech, artist, woodchucker, delivery driver, blue-collar laborer, architectural draftsperson, front desk clerk, receptionist, sales clerk, vice president, equity officer, arts administrator, program director, walker, woman, pet owner, apartment dweller, peer, colleague, collaborator, feminist, hippie, communist, leftist, and the list goes on.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Then you're not amazing.
That actually needs applause. You survived all of those experiences, and there's still a brilliant person.
What it revealed to me were two things. One is that, chances are by looking at me, you wouldn't guess that I have been all of those things. And the other thing, and how that sort of reveals, what we can know about someone just, from the facade. And two, that the experience that we have and that we hold is so diverse and so rich and can connect in so many different ways to so many different things and so many different people. And it's really quite miraculous. So I'm curious to know how your own identities and the roles and responsibilities and masks, personas that you've played, how you've been able to lean into them, what you've learned from them, how you've incorporated them into your lives, which you wear easily and which you don't wear that easily. Yeah, I know that Charlotte, for instance, you have a lot of hats that you've worn and that you do wear. You're a film graduate, you're a mother, you're a grandmother, you're a sister, you're a podcast creator.
What I'm saying now is I'm 6 degrees south or north of crazy. And one of the things that I haven't been for a while is crafty. So when you talked about remembering things, I have these masks, and I have them over a little dish of things that I have remembrances from my mother. But everybody in my mother's family, my mother, my Aunt Cozy, Aunt Lena, Grandma, they all crocheted. And my mother is a perfectionist. So both would teach me how to sew, and that crochet didn't work out so well. But my aunt did. And so during COVID, I've had to sit and, like, be still. I'm not a still person. I like moving around. So I had a cousin who had a surgery, and instead of taking the pain medicine, he wanted to talk to me. And I would be typing and stuff, and he would say, "Can't you just sit still and talk?" So I crocheted this hat. So this is a very big hat. I'm also not good at following directions. I followed the directions for a little while, and then I improvised. So I have a hat that can be like a character that I like, the woman from The Matrix.
Yeah. I love her.
And also there are people in Star Trek. And so this hat reminds me of my aunts and my role and my attempts to learn how to do creative things with my hands beside writing. And I've negotiated a lot of roles, and I'm learning now just how to produce from home, how to produce and how to use audio. My nemesis was audio. Working with the radio station and working with this podcast program has forced me to have to do some editing. So I have become one. Now my new hat is being at one with the waveform and sailing, picturing it as something to sail through as I nip and tuck.
Cool. Thank you. The thing that popped out to me there in what you said was innovation, and how innovation is one of the ways that we shift and change. And I'm wondering if Leslie, you want to comment on how maybe innovation has played out in how the different hats that you might wear have come into play.
It seems to me that innovation is something that I've come into as I've aged, right? Excuse me, my hat isn't sitting very comfortably, which is kind of symbolic. There we are. So I got involved in The Artist's Way, which is it's a book and a group that's it aims at releasing creativity, right? And a lot of that creativity I found had been choked over the years with sort of, being a wife and a mother and an office worker and, just fulfilling all those expected roles rather than roles that I felt were sort of sitting inside me waiting to be born. And it's been a very freeing kind of process, like, go with the creative urge, right? And the urge to, if you fancy doing something, just go ahead and do it, right? Which is years ago, I never would have done that. So yes, I found I've become a lot more innovative as I've, I guess, become older and freer, and I have fewer time constraints, with work and family, and just the time to do what I want to do rather than what I have to do. So yeah, that time, to have the time to innovate can be very freeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you made a distinction too about, the expectation of roles that we have in terms of, there's no negotiating about motherhood or parenthood. That's something that you step up to do regardless of how you kind of feel about it. But that there are also these places where passion can arise, and where do we find time for those roles? Because they're very different, and the things that drive us and motivate us to wear those hats are different.
But even now, the idea of time, I have so many things that I want to do, and I still have to prioritize what actually can I do. So, we still have to make choices as to what we're going to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have a way of doing that, of prioritizing which hat you get to wear today?
I don't have a theory, no. There's no pat answer to that, I don't think. I have, I'm a great list writer. And sometimes, I sort of, the night before, I think about what's going to be my priority for the next day. And so when I wake up in the morning, that's the first thing that I attack, right? And some things just go by the wayside. And if they go by the wayside, I figure, well, hey, they weren't that important today.
Yeah. You'll notice from my list that I wrote out, list writer did not make my list. That's not one of the hats that I wear at all. And so my, part of me has great list making envy, because I think it would help me in my life sometimes.
Oh, being that organized scares the hell out of me. How can you wing it if you've got a
that's the dichotomy, isn't it? You want the freedom to wing it, but it's like when you write poetry, there's free verse, and then there's the really traditional structured verse as well, with the rhymes and the feet and the iambic pentameters and everything else. I don't write that kind of poetry, but if I did, they say that the structure actually gives you freedom as well.
I've heard.
I like the buzz in there being, I'm one of the few people, well, let's put it this way. I specialized in poetry at university. Most of what I read was poetry. And there's something in between the traditional iambic pentameter and trochees and sonnets, and that sprung rhythm that writers were starting to use in the late 19th century, and Gerard Manley Hopkins was one of them. And that's what I fool around with, actually. And the intonement is really interesting stuff.
I like intonement. I've played with intonement. I have to say, this is my notebook. It's kind of crazy. I filled up 3 trying to keep up with things. And so I've got one of these that says, Charlotte, my health. Neil has inspired me to keep track of my health. So I have one of these that's got my health progress. And then on the flip side, I've got my business health stuff. And then I have these phones going off at different times. And my daughter is threatening to put me out on the yard because... So why are the bells? It's like we're in a factory. You have these bells going off every other hour or the other. So.
Oh my Lord, I don't have that many lists, Charlotte. I just have one. It's like the priority for tomorrow, right? And then things happen during the day too that scupper your best laid plans anyway.
Yes.
And sometimes you just go with it.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
I know, Gail, when you and I talked on the phone this week, you had quite a list of different hats and different leanings and challenges that you had mentioned to me in terms of characters that you played and roles that you had worn, and I encouraged you to think about 3 that you felt like you wanted to share with us. Do you want to share those?
Sure. Well, I went back. There's a distinction between a role that you choose and a role that's thrust on you by society. And going back, it's interesting about people in North America, especially because we come from all kinds of different traditions, and the traditions are often melded into one person. And so I'm a very typical example of a European Canadian, where I've got on my mom's side is the old English settler and the Mennonites who've been floating around there for a few hundred years in Niagara region and Lancaster County. And then I have my dad's side, which is English and Ukrainian. And of all of that mess, everybody, that's the genetics, but culture is stronger than genes, actually. And it's what you're raised to. A very nice example of that is my godchildren. They are, again, typical Dutch and Irish and Ukrainian and German. So they have to choose. You know, you sort of fall into it, and it's the way you're raised, too. And it's interesting. My goddaughter, Juliet, she was about 6 or 7, and we were at the grandma's house, Heather's mother's house, and we were going out, and there was this beautiful little castle lit up by lights, and she said, Mommy, I see the fairies. And then Nana said, she's Irish. And so when I grew up, even though I have an English last name, and it's sort of the mythos of my family, Harwood is the English last name. And I toyed with the idea of changing my last name to Kosakshenko, which is the proper name, because I know my family history speaks of how your names are stolen from you. My grandmother wasn't allowed to go to school, public school, unless she changed her name from Wasalenka to Jean. And that was very typical 100 years ago. This is going back 100 years. And this is the way the elites played the tune in this country. And so my grandfather, Albert Harwood, had the temerity to fall in love with this lovely Ukrainian woman, Wasalenka Kosakshenko. And he was summarily disowned from his family. He said, that's fine. So he went and moved in with my grandmother's people. And so that's why I retain the name. We all do. My brothers and I do, because of that story. But we were all, and so unfortunately, Albert died when my dad was a baby. And so she married a Ukrainian man, Yvonne Saltis, who I knew as my grandfather. And so he was a great guy, just a wonderful man. And, you know, Ukrainian was spoken in the house. We observed all the traditions. I can hear, you know, it's sort of in my genes that I can actually understand some Russian or Ukrainian. But Dad, of course, wanting to be Canadian and fit in, you know, didn't ship us off to Ukrainian school. I wish he did. But anyway, I spent summers with my grandparents. But that was very much informative. That was really a growth thing for me because there was my Uncle Bill Goseya, and he was a communist realtor. And he would get stuff from the Soviet embassy, and I got my first copy of the Communist Manifesto from my dear old Uncle Bill, and that was really cool. He politicized me. I love it. And he and my dad would have these political fights. It was just hilarious. And so politics was very much a part of the household. And Bubba just walked out. She's, forget this. But I sat there and I listened because I found it absolutely interesting. And so in that regard, I was a daughter and a granddaughter. I was a farm worker, and I was a salesperson because my kid brother and I, Reggie, we would go with my grandfather, and we load the truck up with the surplus, and we'd go and sell it on the market or go house to house downtown St. Catharines. And I started doing this when I was around 7, when my math was good enough to do it, and it was awesome. And so I always had that little business tinge to me, but I never recognized it until later on in life. So that's a nice thing. And so that's my background. And then and again, it's little genes take over, but part of my background and why I followed the profession I did was I'm a wordsmith. I'm total wordsmith, totally love words, totally love music. And of course, the good poetry. The good poetry is what people sing. And in the old days, as you guys probably know, people they told stories, and they also told stories through verse because you can remember it a lot better. So I always deplored the lack of having people memorize poetry and recite poetry in a beautiful, impassioned way. And my dad used to recite Robert Service poetry. A bunch of the boys were whooping it up in the Malamute Saloon, that one. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, was another reciter of poetry. So I grew up with that. And I, too, recite poetry, mostly the musical kind. I remember in class one time, I said, well, try to show the students the difference between the phrase and the clause. And then, down by the river, I shot my baby. Well, anyway, so who did what to what? Oh, somebody got shot. Good. And where? The river. Okay, so then you get the action, then you get the description, right? But the hats that I wore when I was a young person, I was a factory chick. I was a strawberry picker. I was a babysitter. I worked for the school board for one summer. I was a university student. I was a journalism student. I had an internship up in Barrie, Ontario for the Examiner. And then I became a teacher. And I became a teacher I started off in Nigeria for a couple of years. And I became the traveler. I wanted to see everything and traveled all over the place, up in along the West African coast and then up into the Sahara Desert. And that's lots of stories about that. And I don't have 8 minutes here to tell you. I'm just remembering one morning I woke up in a village in the middle of Burkina Faso, in the middle of the desert, and well, anyway, it was interesting. Let's put it that way. And then there was another one where all I wanted to do was go to the washroom at a game park in Botswana. And there's this bull elephant who decided to visit me while I was on my way to the latrine. And that's another story, which I really should write. It's hilarious. It's funny. So there I was as an adventurer. I also went to Britain. And I was in England and Ireland. And I was in Northern Ireland at the height of the Troubles. And that was pretty crazy. I remember running with my friend Charlotte, another Charlotte, and we were running for our lives down Albert Street over the Albert Street Bridge because she was from the Catholic side, but she had the temerity to have her gynecologist over on the Protestant side. So we're coming back to the Catholic side, and these very smart lads thought we were prods.
Gail, answer me one question. How good's your Ukrainian? Do you still remember?
A little bit. Yesterday, just a little bit. Just a tiny, tiny bit. But there's words that pop up in my brain. And it's the words that we use in our family.
But it's po-ukrainsky może.
Oh, I see. So you've actually learned it.
Well, it's just one of the languages that I learned along the way. I'm actually English background, but I have an ear for sound, so I'm pretty
well.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I pulled out from what you were saying, Gail, that I thought was really interesting. How you brought cultural identity and the cultural roles and the cultural hats that we play in our lives, because those are also part of the roles that we play, especially in our families and in our communities, extended communities, but also that can draw these very political lines sometimes, in terms of where it is that we find belonging or not, as you mentioned in your dad marrying this woman, and same thing happened in my family, and I'm sure that's, or your grandfather, and same thing. We could probably find a lot of how that works in
your own families,
all of our lineages.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. I just wanted to mention. Oh, sorry. Did you have something else, Robin?
Well, I just thought that in terms of political identity, Chris from the LGBTQ community might have a couple of things to say about that, or otherwise.
Well,
not that I want to put you on the spot, Chris. Maybe you want to talk about other things, but
yeah, I was getting there. Yeah,
so I just want to make
what I was going to get into. So definitely, I would call myself a proponent of the second wave of feminism and the fourth wave of feminism. And the second wave was I see the nun.
And I just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak also, Gail.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay. So that's all. The time. I can just close that up. Because certainly I didn't even mention anything about teaching, but you heard all about that, so you don't need to know anymore. Certainly the more inclusive feminism of today is more to my liking, because it was this white middle class feminism of the 70s, which I didn't relate to because I'm working class. I had no idea about these things. And I was pegged into working class roles simply because of how I dressed, how I spoke, and you can't be a professional because you're a factory chick and there's something wrong with the thing.
Well, Gail, the interesting.
So,
and this is universal. I did this in 4 countries, and the students loved it. And went, if they asked me if I did anything else besides teaching for a living, I said, "Oh yeah." So I told the story. But I think that's
all right, Chris.
Carrying on a little bit with that that working class mode. My probably the biggest hat that I've worn in my life is this one. Obviously, I don't wear it any longer, but I grew up in a very Roman Catholic family. So, I was the daughter, the child, the student, all of those kinds of things that go along with growing up in a Roman Catholic family in the 50s. And so this is where I ended up.
Yeah.
And this, let me just see.
For our listening people, Chris, do you want to just explain the picture?
Yes, of course. So the first picture is a photograph of me at the age of probably 18, 19, that shows me completely dressed in black and white Roman Catholic nun's outfit. And I wore that for a number of years. And nowadays, I'm much more comfortable in this kind of attire, which shows me in a shirt and blue jeans and a cup made of clay, sitting in a Bolivian person's backyard with the clay bricks behind me. So sorry, I forgot that this is not video. And so while in terms of the politics of my life, I've certainly gone from a very conservative almost right. My dad was a real mixture of both conservative and not conservative. So I think I grew up with that mixture, but I've definitely emerged on the non-conservative side of life, because in some ways the hat that I wore in terms of that habit and that uniform after a while didn't fit anymore. One of the things that I recognized was that it totally separated me from other people and from the world. And I was a teacher as well, Gail. So I grew up teaching, and I taught in Malaysia and Brunei and later in New York, and in a different format in South America. But it is important to me that original hat that I wore, even though I've totally left that behind, there's a part of me that continues on the inside to hold and carry the values and the beliefs that I had back in those days. So, at some point you saw I wore my feminist hat. Yeah. Then I wore my lesbian hat. Yeah. And so as I've grown up, wearing different hats, they change, but in some ways they also stay the same. Mm-hmm. So somehow they all become integrated in who I am today. And so no matter what hat I wear today, and today I'm wearing this hat that says I support queer refugees, mm-hmm. which is my big passion at the moment. That comes from a long, long tradition of all the hats that I've worn over the many years, and bringing me to the point today where this is who I am and this is what I do. So I'm no longer that Roman Catholic nun, as people used to think of me, but I still am a person of spirituality. Mm-hmm. I still believe in mission. I still believe in unfortunately, in the divisions there are in our society today between the rich and the poor, the North and the South, all of those things, but they all kind of come together into me. And it doesn't matter in a way what hat I wear at any given time, because I can change my hats. And I can be any one of those things that I think in the moment is the appropriate hat to wear.
Right. Well, I really noticed that, and I'm just going to say one sentence. Believe it or not, I am a person of spirituality, and it's a spirituality of silence and silent practice. And I think I've mentioned that before, because I am going to go to a Zoom Quaker meeting right after this, which I've been a part of for 30 years. So I hear you. I totally get it, Chris. Thank you for sharing that.
So this is my pride hat, but this hat belonged to my partner, who died a few years ago of dementia, and I was her caregiver. But I was a lesbian caregiver in a facility of where people, residential care facility. So I was her caregiver, I was her partner, I was her lover, and I was an out lesbian in that context. So that seemed to me to be the appropriate hat to wear at the time. It was her hat, and I've taken that hat with me so that there are times when I need to wear that hat with its flashing lights to sort of remind myself and other people that we do wear many different hats. And the hat we wear depends on how appropriate it is at the time and at the moment that we're living. So I think we all have many hats that we can draw on, and I'm really grateful for having had all those different hats. I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be who I am today if I hadn't had all of those different hats.
You know,
I really love.
Chris, when you put on the brown hat, what I heard was Che Guevara and my trip to Cuba. Is that's the rebel hat right there, the communist rebel.
That's correct. My memoir, if it ever gets written, is called "You Have a Problem with Authority." I've been told that many, many times in my life.
Yes.
The subtitle is "No,
Must be
you
kin.
have a problem with me."
Beautiful.
I love
A rule breaker, a fighter, a challenger, a shit disturber, and short. And I come to it after having worn many, many hats.
Yeah.
Which is the thing that I loved about what you said, you know, in terms of bringing how we integrate all of those different hats into the shoes that we stand in now, you know. It's not that we ever leave one behind for another. They don't swap out that easily, right? They just kind of get layered on top of each other into this great Mad Hatter's display. And so, yeah, I really appreciated that. Thank you. I know that that Neall, you and I also had a conversation this week that was it felt philosophical, and I'm wondering if, you know, what your brain conjured up kind of integrates some of what we've all talked about and what you came up with, and then I want to leave some time to give Judith the last word.
I actually wrote anyway, it's a little short vignette about, and it's called Masks. But I want to preface it with a very quick, when I was 5.5 years old and I would be going to kindergarten or grade 1, whatever, is that we moved into a lumber camp in northwestern Ontario, and until I was 10 years old, 10 and a half years old, I went to my first day in school. And as a consequence, I was not trained. I mean, I was homeschooled, but I remember very little of the government program that I went through, because I would do my 2 hours of school every day and then go play. So I wrote a little vignette that is called Masks. Pretend you can do it. It can't be that hard. When you're a nobody, it's easier to be anybody. Pretend you can supervise the installation of flooring in a 10-story student residence. Just put on a construction helmet and I can do it mask, and away you go. I can do it. I can negotiate $1 million cosmetics contract in merry old Portsmouth, England, with barristers and deal makers, with compliments from London lawyers. It can't be that difficult. Just put on a mask. They look like I can do it. That looks like I can do that all the time. Put on a confident mask that says, "Library, please," as you step into the doctor's only elevator at the Toronto General Hospital. If the operator assumes you must be a doctor, you wouldn't have nerve enough to be there researching radiation poisoning for a project. They never asked me where I got my degree, or even if I had one, when they invited me to sit on the review board of the Advanced Systems Institute. I had my high-tech mask on, and how hard can that be? I had the same mask on when Simon Fraser University asked me to sit on a panel reviewing startup business plans. And when, after a few years, I began chairing that panel, I received an invitation from BCIT to lecture on business plans. I didn't need to wear a mask as they already applied it on for me. When I was asked, could I start a business in China to do some engineering work for building a hospital in California, or to start a bottled water business in New Zealand, and a different one in Oregon selling to the gangsters in Las Vegas, I put on a different confidence mask and said, of course I can do that. They burned through a ton of investors' money trying. And when I declined to do chemo, the cancer agency says, you can't do that, you know. I put on my lying mask and said, I know what I'm doing. I'm confident that I can do this, and asked, what is there about no that you don't understand? When you don't confine yourself to a cage of I am this or I am that, being anybody gets easier and easier. Pretend you can do it and say, this can't be that difficult, can it? Thank you. Hey, I've
Make it till you make it.
Make it till you make it. You know, that's true. And I was doing consulting work for the federal government in Edmonton, and he was the first man I went in and gave my new business card that says, I've changed my name, first name and last name. And he said, what's this about? I said, hey, life's an adventure if you don't push the envelope. He said, good, let's talk about the project that I want you to do for me. So I worked with I've done consulting work for both Simon Fraser and UBC, and Simon Fraser at the High Tech in Surrey. I did consulting work for the Ontario government, the Alberta government, the BC government, and nobody ever asked me, have you got more than a grade 10 education? Because I would have to say no. If I was being honest. But hey. That
reminds me of a friend of mine who on his business cards for his business, and he was, a fairly powerful contractor building big commercial projects, but he had this string of letters after his name that essentially was an acronym for high school dropout, never went to university, and it really has nothing to do with our abilities and our capabilities. Some of these identities that we wear, some of these hats that we wear, but that we can be pigeonholed into stereotypes and people's ideas about who we are because of them, right? And that they create a certain judgment based on what that label is or whatever that hat is that we wear, that really can have nothing but everything to do with who we are and what we're capable of doing. So thank you.
My takeaway, just to finish, is when you're a nobody, it's easier to be an anybody.
There's that story really struck me about the kinds of things we need to do to break that chain of injustice, because that's what it is. There's too many people in our society who are ignored, belittled, simply because of the way they look or where they're from.
Yeah, for sure. And Judith, you're the last one here on the call in your beautiful sun hat, floppy hat there, pretending that it's bright outside.
Well, I want to tip my hat to all of you. You're amazing people. You've done so much and you're so accomplished. It's just a really, it's really intimidating. So what I've been up to in the last while is trying to get beyond the hats and the mask and find my authentic self. And so what I've stumbled on and managed to own is the wounded demon. And so I'm learning how to heal that.
That's really powerful, because I think that it's our goal in this flesh body, in this meat bag that we're given as human beings. Our spirit really wants us to find our essentialness within this flesh that carries us about. And so I love that we're kind of ending off the podcast today talking about identities and the hats that we wear and the masks that we have worn and that we do wear, thinking about what that authentic and genuine self is and looks like, and how we incorporate all of these different ways of being, and the ways that we have been and do continue to be, shine light in our lives and make us who we are.
I like what Judith said about slaying that thing, because if you notice in a lot of stuff I sign Sister C, and I have over life accumulated lots of different titles and different degrees, and you can get really puffed up with these degrees. And once I had an experience, and those that talk about spiritual practices, and I had all of these titles, and it's like Spirit said, well, let's just see what you can do as Sister C. And so I have dropped so many things, which I thought, I had an experience of working with some women and people who were so mean with the privileges that they got by having different designations. For example, within a church, I had a religious title, and they had a room for people with these titles where they had crystal glasses. And I squeezed the glass so hard I broke a crystal glass, because I thought, this doesn't fit with what I was raised with equality. And why should we have these crystal glasses instead of, the regular things? Or why shouldn't everybody have a crystal glass? And so I've had some fun, just especially in coming to Vancouver, where nobody knows me, to just really see how my path goes as Sister C, and see what things that the creativity, the different gifts, because we have a lot of gifts. You called it a meat bag. Our meat bags came unadulterated, no salt or sugar added, that we could make as tasty as we like. And so that is what I am experiencing in this 7th decade of my life, having fun with health stuff. But I went to, and that's what I love too, is do a commercial for CJSF. What I love about the station is being able to not be in a pigeonhole. I can do health one day, do something with jazz another day, talk about BIPOC issues, and not be pigeonholed to say, oh, you should be doing this. You have all this health training. You should be doing health education. You're Black. You should be doing Black stories. So I really like what each of you said about making the hat whatever you want to put on for that day, and reflecting that thing from your livelihood and your heritage and your family. That's what you want to reflect for that day, and being open to how the people that you interact with share and influence and change and modify your meat bag. So
very zen, Robin. That's a very zen thing to say.
Thank you so much, Robin, for bringing out this wonderful discussion. And
Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. That was so rich. I'm sure we could talk for another hour at least on everything that and make comments and play off of what everybody said. So thank you so much.
I want to ask each person, let you know to please email your mailing address. We have something to send you, some certificates and other things that have to go through the mail. So you can just email it and just put, like your name, contact info in the subject line.
To your email address, Charlotte?
Yes, the PBA, AFC at gmail.com. So next week, we are looking toward ways that we can, like with how you manipulate the backs and fronts of things, things you might want to demonstrate. We have Chef Amanda, who's from time to time will be doing cooking things. But if you have creative arts, if you have jokes, as you said, Gail, we are going to be experimenting with some different forms of formatting. And also the two of you that are teachers, we're going to give an opportunity for people who do a workshop or have something that they would like to teach to do a sample with, so that people could say, oh, I'd like to do 5 weeks as with that. Because all of the senior centers have been told to kind of prepare for even a year of being on this modified admission. 411 up to 4 people can come, 4 to 6 people could come for a small group. So just think about, if you are someone that teaches something, if there's something that you would like to teach, you could send me an email about it. Judith.
Could somebody do a series on poetry, writing poetry?
Oh, my.
I did a poetry writing series. That's how I actually started with 411. I did a series on writing yourself happy. But I can inquire if there's anyone else that would like to do a series on poetry. But it's a sample class, so everybody has an opportunity to propose something that you might want to do a 15 or 20 minute sampler of. Robin is telling everyone, thank you. She does have to go to...
Robin, I don't want you to leave just for 1 second. I found out the government will not support face-to-face anything. So my idea of doing some interviews at seniors, it goes by the wayside because the government won't fund anything to do with that for at least for a year. So I'll find another way. Thank you for your input.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. So Neall, what about how about you teach some poetry, how to write poetry?
How about you, Gail?
Oh, I was thinking of that. It depends on my energy levels.
Okay.
I went, and then I wanted to do something at meeting, and went, I can do that. And then my friend said, Gail, you're still going through treatment. You just have to calm down. That's what I Neall.
Well, we have these things for sample classes, but we were also at the beginning talking about a program. The 20th of December will be our last show where we'll be taking a break after that. So if you think of things that would make an interesting show, when you mentioned comedy, I was really curious of what you might do for comedy, but other things that people think would be entertaining. You could brainstorm and we could have, maybe whether it's a talent show or a collective, something like Saturday Night Live, except it will be Thursday at 1.
Thursday afternoon, half dead.
No, we'll be more alive than ever.
I knew I'd get a chuckle. Sorry, Charlotte, couldn't resist.
Yes.
Can I answer Gail's observation about poetry? Is that I open myself to the emotions that are related to some sort of idea. Like I love that little the poem I wrote about it's only a step.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think if I told you the total story, but that poem actually saved my life, I think, because I was in a situation with a rockfall that needed to just focus on one step at a time. So I spoke the poem as I crossed about a half a kilometer of rock falls, and it was really I was very concerned, and I had also walked 5.5 kilometers, so I was already tired when I got to it. So anyway, make a long story is that I allow the emotions to speak, and so I can't teach anything about it because it's allowing myself to feel.
Right.
And then that's step number 1. Step number 2 is you put it into some format. Step number 3 is this is where the technique comes in. And this is where the knowledge of, how do you work a metaphor? How do you work this, that? They come naturally, and your metaphors come naturally. It's just a matter of where you place it in the poem. How is it? Are you
that's the gift.
finishing? Are you accomplishing what you want emotionally?
No, it's about the gift that I've been given, that I use words to describe emotions, and I've worked at it for 75 years. I've worked at the idea of it's my emotions that write the poetry.
Oh yeah.
And
I've been writing poetry since it'll be 52 years. I wrote my first poem, and people say, it's kind of in sentences, but I put rhythm to it. I didn't quite know how to do the different traditional forms. I do now, and sometimes it comes out that way, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah. So I guess what's going on is technique and understanding how to edit and how to accomplish your.
Have different techniques, so it might be interesting from just different people.
I've been writing poetry since I was 75 years old. Total of 5 years. And it just flows when it wants. And I got to tell you, Chris, I love that hat. That is just beautiful. It reminds me of my trips to Cuba. And Che.
Yeah. Oh, this is a Che hat.
I lived in Santiago de Chile.
See.
During the dictatorship, so.
Yeah.
Well, that would be an interesting story. Have you written any stories about that?
Yes, quite a few.
Because we're still welcoming more stories for the spin section. I don't know whether you all have visited the Powered by Age website now. We have almost all of our episodes, and we have these recordings of sessions, and it's open for still recording more stories, poems, or interviews that you have done. So let me know.
I certainly have a lot of stories written. Where I'm at right now is trying to put it all together in some form of memoir. I have a problem with authority.
Yeah, I'm working with a woman in LA who's doing her memoir, and I have her working on kind of episodes, because sometimes it's very daunting trying to do a whole memoir. But as episodes, then it doesn't have to be like linear.
Yes. I'm right. I'm doing episodes because the only way I can do it.
That's the best way to go, because then you just okay, that's one, and then the next week, okay, put out another one, and then all of a sudden after a couple of months, I've got a bulk of stuff here, right?
Yeah, and they don't have to be sequential, because now the new style in these TV shows and movies, it's like 7 days before, 28 days later. They jump back and forth. This Is Us has won, several Emmys, and they jump ahead, they jump back, they jump to the left, to the right. So it really has opened people up to receiving things that aren't in traditional linear.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it has been wonderful spending time with you all again.
Yeah.
I always want to sing the song, the more we get together, the happier we'll be, but I won't sing. But
Thank you all.
look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yeah.